Is Not Ready is a local romantic comedy coming to Ster-Kinekor and New Metro next weekend. Now, the plot sees Thabo's longtime girlfriend, Zonke, who gives him an ultimatum either to marry her or let her go. This sets Thabo on a journey of discovery about whether he's ready to take the next step. For more insights into this film, we're joined by producer Sammy Rabolele and director Tebogo Mogale. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, He's Not Ready, a story that has been in the making for quite some time. Tebogo, maybe let's ask you, what inspired the story? Is this a personal love tale?
Oh, there we go. I think partial lived experience.
Oh, really?
Partial friends experience.
Okay.
And then pure imagination. So, combination of the three. But yeah, that's what inspired me. I think it's something that I had lived before.
Okay.
And it's something I don't know if we give a lot of thought to, especially on the guy side of things. Once you reach that stage with your partner and that question starts coming up, the steps that have to follow can be daunting. So that's what inspired it.
And if partially this is part of the story, does it end with a ring?
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does?
In my case,
in your story, okay. That's amazing. So, speaking about storytelling, just how important is it in using storytelling in educating about some of the social ills and the things that we go through generally in life?
Vital. I think we learn better with stories than we do with just straight facts. I think a lot of people use storytelling as a form of education. And I think, well, at least for me, watching stories engages me a lot more. I guess that's why we have the culture of the social media and TikTok, and it's education in a sense, right? So that's what it's engaging. So I think it's very, very important, and it's a tool that is underutilized, in my opinion. We need to use a lot more storytelling, and I think that helps us become better storytellers. If we become better storytellers, we become better educators.
Of course. Sammy, you're the producer of this movie. If we speak continuously on storytelling, I mean, for many years, movies that came out of South Africa, especially in the post-apartheid era, were about the struggles of South Africans and how we moved into democracy. But now we're starting to see us telling other stories in other genres, love, comedy. Are we slowly moving in the right direction for us to be competing on a global stage?
We are. It's taking small steps. I think there's different elements that need to change. But we're starting to think broadly. I think with the entrance of the international streamers and even like your sister partner, like Newzroom and them coming up, you know, that actually gives an opportunity for a broad range of stories. And it's important for us as a country, but also as a continent, to embrace a broad range of stories, because there's a danger in a single story, right? Like, it becomes such a repetitive thing, and you're like, oh, that story again. You know, in South Africa, it's like, oh, we're doing that one again, you know? But there's such a broad range of stories. I mean, the story of Newzroom Africa is a great story. By the way, happy 5th year, is it?
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully there's a movie coming soon of Newzroom Africa.
Right,
but you know, we'll do that for you.
On
There you go. But there's a danger in a single story, and I think there's now more opportunities for broader stories. And here we look at the institution of marriage, actually, and how it affects a modern-day young black South African guy who has to deal with the home pressures of tradition, but also the challenges of church, and, you know, which is what most young men have to deal with today, outside of also the culture that we live within, of, you know, sometimes multiple partners, sometimes, you know, that's just the reality. You know,
It certainly is. How important is it to tell those stories for truly what they are? For that young black man who'll be sitting in the cinema watching and being able to reflect and seeing himself within that story. How vital is it for you not to mix up with other issues, either political or social ills, but truly just bringing it in its purest form?
I think it's incredibly important. Why? Because I think, like I said, the institution of marriage is one of the most important institutions. When we talk about, I mean, we're going through elections, we just went through elections and talking about nation building, like family is such an important part of nation building. So to tell that story in its essence is so important, so that it's not disturbed by others, but it's actually what are the considerations around marriage. you know, what gets in the way of guys making a decision to get married or not get married?
True.
And what makes girls worry about whether guys are making that decision or not? And how do guys think about it? I think it's incredibly important to isolate that decision or isolate that story and tell it for what it is. Because I think when there's other parts of the story, like if you tell it outside of an apartheid story, it doesn't get the airtime that it deserves. You know, like, so we don't actually delve into what are the motivations that made the guy say yes or no, you know, to the girl, which is like what everybody has their own story around love, you know, everybody has their own love story. We're all the hero of our own love story.
Of course. Still staying with you, Sammy, I mean, you're the producer of the show. And I can imagine that as a producer of the show, you have to think in terms of the business as well. Yeah. How much money is this movie going to make? And if you're putting it out in the cinemas, how much traction is it going to get? And that traction depends on a number of things, and one of them being the cast. I mean, we've heard for many years people saying open up the industry, bring in new entrants, and I see you've tried a good mix of that, because you still need those recognizable faces in order for you to be able to sell those tickets. So just talk to me with regards to that process for you in selecting your cast for this movie.
Yeah, so we had to think quite intensely about both of that. So we've got Bontate Sello Sebotsana, you know, we've got Bo Mositu, Pops Mudikwana, and a few of very famous faces that people will see. But we've got a lot of talented young actresses and actors who are coming through, who we thought would be great mix, so that we can answer the question that there is talent out there, but also, you know, you have to have faces that people carry, so that Katleho can say, I'll pay for the movie ticket because I actually kind of like Mpopop, so I kind of like Mostum. I want to see how they deliver on this. So that balance is important as a draw card, but I think there are other elements as well, like the other elements of ensuring that you actually get the message out. You know, how do you get the message out, especially now with cinema having struggled after COVID. So to get people back into cinema, it's a tough job, you know, it's no easy feat at all. But there is a way. Cinema is a great way for us to experience stories because you are in a room together with, say, 50, 60, 70, 80 other people. So that's an important part, by the way, of the making money of the movie as a first window before we go stream it at Netflix or stream it wherever or give it to Movie Room. Before you go there, it's important to take it to cinema. But I think also it's important for us as a social experiment. When we watch movies together, we have a shared experience. You say, how did you feel about that? How did I feel? When we're at home, you know, if it gets to a scene I don't kind of like, the guy does something I don't kind of like, I change him. You know, like, you know, at cinema, you're forced to sit through it and actually have to engage. How did I feel about why he made that choice or why he didn't make that choice? So, you know, we all remember, well, at least I remember the days when the first date was
at the movies.
At the movies. That was like a standard first date because you had a lot to talk about afterwards. And what we're hoping is with this movie, we can get something of that.
You can create that. Yeah. As a director, Tebogo, what look and feel did you go for in this movie in order to have those conversations going after the movie has ended?
I think what we really wanted to do first and foremost was to try to depict as close to what I would consider an average lived experience of a regular guy, or at least an urban regular guy, if I could put it like that. So the look was, I mean, it's obviously, because it's a comedy, it's a romantic comedy, it has to, you know, it has to look lively, it has to look like something fun that people want to engage. But you also don't want to make it look unrealistic or, you know, something that people can't relate to. I think it has to feel like something that you or the guy you know, your brother, the person you know's lived experience. That was what was important first and foremost.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the setting of the movie is?
Setting of the movie is in Gauteng.
Okay.
So a lot of it takes place in Johannesburg and Pretoria. Yeah, in and around Gauteng. Gauteng. Yeah.
All right.
But both urban and
Township.
And township.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is predominantly that kind of lived experience of an average young black man. You touched on the issue of cinemas, and we spoke before the interview in terms of the reception of people going now back to the movies, especially in a world where instantaneous entertainment is at your fingertips. We're watching movies on our phones, on our laptops, and for us to take a shower, take a drive, go to the movies, buy a ticket, buy popcorn, sometimes seems so tedious when we've got all of this. Why did you guys still choose to go the cinema route?
So number one, I think because the global cinema space is actually fighting to stay. So bigger than our independent production is the global productions, right? They're forcing to go back to cinema. So that's enough to actually get us, maybe get people back again to say, we're going to cinema. So, and people are starting to go back. I mean, Bad Boys just did like 100 million in its first weekend, I think globally, which is a great number. It just shows that there is an appetite for people to go back to cinema. And I do think, you know, people are open to long form. In many ways. I mean, podcasts now are going long form. So people are actually open to going and sitting in front of a movie for a long, long time. It's more trying to make sure that people go sit in front of a movie for a long, long time with each other. So, you know, not to sit isolated, you know, because that's the other thing. It's a difference between sitting and listening to your Spotify alone or going to a concert, you know. Like, there's a different experience. Gubs is great by myself, but Gubs the Small is great at the symphony. You know, with that it's a different experience to experience that with other people. And I think it's the same thing with cinema. So we're hoping that more and more people are going back to cinema. This is a great movie to go out to cinema for.
And this movie is coming out on the 28th of June. I've run out of time, but I really wanted to know. Tomorrow's June 16, it's Youth Day. How do you implore young people to use their crafts and their skills in furthering any messages, especially when it comes to the youth? Let's start with you, Tebogo.
I think the youth have a voice, and it's important how they use that voice and finding different ways to use that voice. Being June 16, obviously, we know what that means for our country and our country's history. So it's important that they find ways and means, and I think storytelling is probably the biggest way they could do it. And with the tools at hand, the technology at hand, it's easy for them to do it. So more and more youth voices need to be heard. I just think we need to figure out a way of how do we curate that and bring that together in a helpful way.
In a helpful way, Sammy, very quickly.
I think learn each other's stories. I think that's a big thing about youth. Sometimes youth, and maybe with everyone accessing media for themselves, we tend to think about ourselves a lot. But, you know, it's that old age story, like travel, get to learn other people's stories, learn your neighbor's story, learn the other town's story, learn the next country's story. Because I think Africa is a young country, and we're going to have a great story to tell, but we have to bother to learn each other's story. Before you tell it, first learn it, so that it's actually a real story, and you're not just making up a story, you know.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best with your movie.
Oh, thank you.
28th June, out in cinemas. He's Not Ready. We wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.